Good morning and welcome to Saturday morning meeting. It's been a busy week for Walmart as they wrapped up their shareholders meeting yesterday. And this morning we're just going to talk about what some of the key takeaways were that we got as observers of the meeting and maybe in some cases participants. But we'll start with Keith with Retail Net Group. Keith, what are some things that you kind of took away from the meeting that seemed to be important for Walmart?
I think they were clear on a lot of the messages that I think you'll pick up in the mainstream. To me, what's always most interesting about the shareholder meetings is not only what Walmart says, but how it aligns with the sentiment in the supplier community. And I think there's general optimism. There is very clearly an increasing intense focus around growth, which I think is a very positive thing, given how much emphasis there has been and continues to be on really improving operational execution and managing profitability. And when you listen to Charles Holley talk about the financial performance, he continues to emphasize that profitability is key, and that is where Walmart remains to have really solid strength. But I think as we've spoken to many vendors, we clearly hear that Walmart is continuing to look for new avenues of growth, and I think for all of us that's a very interesting thing. I also think it's important that they've continued to make moves around fresh and produce and of the few areas where they face some competitive risk. We've seen in many parts of the U.S. Intensifying competition around the perimeter, and it's one of the areas that we think Walmart has a real opportunity to strengthen its defenses. So to me, it's probably too early to see where some of those initiatives will lead us, but it's a good thing to see. And finally, there's no question that as has been the case for the last several years, there's just incredible intensity around the role of e-commerce and digital, which I think is going to be interesting as we talk about the Amazon announcement.
Okay. Ross, what did you take away from the meeting?
Well, I'm from the Show Me State, and I felt like the meeting was really about Walmart saying, let us show you that we are who we say we are. And so I think they indirectly answered a lot of critics and a lot of things in the media. And when you look at the growth that they focused on, I think they're speaking to say we're not a mature company, we're still a growth company. And when you look at some of the social things that they are under fire for, you saw them indirectly answer those. Even Mike Duke highlighting an associate from Chile that refused to take a bribe. And so I think that they were really putting on display and answering a lot of the criticism in the meeting. I think there was maybe two trends that I saw that might not have been as apparent on the surface. The first being the time period they focused on was the last 5 years. There's this thing called first quarter of this year that wasn't talked that much about. And so I think a big question for a lot of suppliers is, what's the second quarter going to come in at? The second thing I think it's underlying that isn't as apparent is a lot of their initiatives, I would say, have what I call a double bottom line. They're good community focused initiatives like hiring of veterans, supporting U.S. business, but they're also good for business. And so they've talked a lot about how sustainability is good for business and it's good for the environment. And I think as you look at all these initiatives, what you see Walmart doing is trying to lead the U.S. economy back to growth by putting dollars back into U.S. businesses. And so that may not be as apparent on the surface, but I see that theme throughout a lot of the things they talked about today.
Okay. Ken, what did you see?
Well, I'll add one of the things that I saw that struck me was the repeated talk about the opportunity for their associates. I think that's right. I think they do have great opportunity for their associates, not only at the higher levels, but at the lower levels. And their talk about how that even a part-time person, it's a great place to work part-time or to get that first job, to get some experience, or to save some money so that you can get some further schooling to be a nurse or whatever. That was a recurring theme, and I think that's, and they're talking a lot to the associates, obviously, in the meeting today. I think that's a valid point. I agree with that. I think it is a great opportunity for their associates across many levels. Then on the international side, I'll just comment about that. So 30% of their business, certainly we've seen it grow over the years, and with the leadership that they have and the direction that they're headed, I see that getting even bigger and contributing even more. One of the things I continue to be struck by with Walmart people is the enthusiasm that I see. And I was in the airport last weekend coming through myself, and there are the people from Chile and Brazil, and they're dancing in the airport and singing and doing their cheers. And I think, their culture, it does have some really great things about it.
And as we kind of wrap up that, Ross, you had talked about what does second quarter look like. And as we look ahead to Walmart's second quarter, which I believe they're projecting to be flat to 2%, so they're not really expecting a lot, in stocks, and how are those going to play into how well Walmart does in the next quarter?
Yeah, well, I think they're going to be key. I don't know that they're the number one factor. I think that there's maybe some more macroeconomic things going on that are impacting their sales, but when you look at in-stocks, I heard John Aden, who's a EVP of Merchandising Services, speak a few weeks ago, and he said, the problems I'm dealing with are problems that I need teams to solve. One individual isn't going to solve them. And when I think of in-stocks, I think of that kind of a principle that there's not one thing that's going to fix this issue. It's not green dots on the shelf. It's a complex issue that has multiple contributing factors, and companies that want to solve this, suppliers that want to solve it along with Walmart, are really going to have to take a multifunctional approach. They're going to have a solid supply chain solution in place, a solid analytics team in place, and good retail merchandising services in place. And I think if you take that multifunctional approach, those are the suppliers that are going to be able to help Walmart achieve what they want to.
But what about suppliers that don't have the funds or the ability to do retail services? I know Walmart has hired a Costa. There are green dots showing up on shelves around the country. Is this a supplier issue, or is it Walmart's issue?
I think you can point certainly to Walmart in some regards. In some categories, you may see inventory levels that are lower than previous years, but I think that for a supplier that doesn't have boots on the ground in a store, there's certainly other aspects, other contributing factors that they can solve, such as their replenishment supply chain solution, their analytics solution. But I actually think that you're going to see more and more suppliers jump into this third-party merchandising space over the coming years. And so if a supplier is outside of that game, I think it's good counsel for them to look at getting into that game.
Okay. Keith, I had a question for you. Is the in-stock situation, because I've heard it brought up a couple times here around and talking with different suppliers, is this a numbers game that Walmart's playing? Are they trying to improve asset efficiency by lowering in-stocks? And I know they don't typically do that in the first part of the quarter, but towards the end of the quarter, if the numbers aren't going to come in, they pull inventory out. Do you think that's something they're looking at and something they're planning on doing?
I think there's the very real possibility that they are managing to the quarter, but I think that there's a bigger issue, which is simply that they are trying to grow comps as productively as possible. So they need their inventory to be the most productive it can possibly be, and that means fundamentally they have to get the right assortment as locally as possible. They have to improve their forecasting and their replenishment. They have to resolve some of the potential labor issues that might be causing issues. And I think, reliance on third-party merchandisers is another element of this as well, the auditing systems. I do think, as was already said, because there are so many moving parts to this challenge, it will become increasingly complex. It's a multifunctional, multidisciplinary problem. And so, there's the potential that there may be some advantage for the suppliers with a lot of money to throw at the problem. I think it's going to be important to be really focused on where you can move the needle with what resources you have. And I would suggest third-party merchandising is likely one of those things. Forecasting and really strong assortment localization is going to be an important discipline to complement that.
And how does that impact EDLC and EDLP for Walmart? If suppliers have to go utilize third party, that's got to drive cost up.
I don't think Walmart wants to do that. I don't think they want to drive the suppliers' cost up. That's my opinion. Through retail coverage.
If the question is, how does this impact EDLC, EDLP? Clearly anything that adds cost, adds complexity to the productivity loop. But that said, I would be hopeful that what the audits will do and what some of the third-party merchandising will do is expose the root cause of some of the current execution issues. And so if in fact these are systemic things that can be corrected in a way that we can get some long-term efficiency gains, it may not be the worst thing for EDLC. I will say in the near term, it is adding cost for both sides. But I think most would agree that regaining some of the operational excellence is pretty central to where Walmart has to head from here. And so I think overall, all these things taken together are positives.
I think this is a very big issue, which is how to decrease labor costs but not hurt sales. I think it's a huge issue right now with Walmart's leadership, with operations, with merchandising. And if you think about what I see going on, like, so why are these issues happening? For one thing, they've taken assortment, they had clarity, they reduced assortment, then they increased assortment. Now their assortment, I would guess, is more than what they had even before they started reducing the assortment because of clarity. Also, you realize that they haven't been building new DCs. Maybe they haven't built a new DC in 5 years?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And then you realize that, so they have these new items, and how are they replenishing these new items? Well, through assembly. Well, if you do it through assembly, now you have a longer lead time. You have to keep more safety stock, and so that's increasing inventory. And I see them doing other things that are increasing inventory. Like an example would be special packs. I see more special packs than I've seen in the past. I see them making some shelf changes to increase assortment, which is great. So you can get more SKUs on the shelf, but you have more inventory. So I see these things happening that are increasing inventory, and I would think, I'm pretty sure from what I hear and see, that this is really a big issue for them, and they are taking action to try to reduce inventory but not hurt sales. They have a team of people, a multifunctional team that's working on it. Many suppliers have heard that they're actually changing the number of stores that are on promotion trade. So there's less stores that are receiving the promotion force outs, if you will. So they're doing that to reduce the inventory, but it's a big conflict right now, if you will, between merchandising and the store operators. The store operators, because some things also didn't sell through in early in the year, so the system just seems to be kind of clogged up. I think this has some important implications to suppliers. One of them is that the suppliers need to also take the challenge and try to help solve the inventory and in-stock opportunities and issues, whether that be dealing with phantom inventory, looking at retail coverage is something that suppliers could do, helping the Walmart replenishment people about where to cut inventory and where not to cut inventory. Don't use a peanut butter approach and just cut their inventory across the board. I think also that suppliers need to start thinking about how to defend their assortment, because I think that they're going to reduce assortment again. Not like they did before, but they can't. This additional assortment is affecting the inventory and the in stocks. And I think too that it affects suppliers. An implication to suppliers is to think about your promotion spending and what kind of return on investment are you getting now when they're not forcing the product out to as many stores. What kind of return on investment are you getting, and how can you keep your return on investment and your sales up in this environment where they are going to reducing the inventories, and they are reducing the number of stores that are receiving feature quantities.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've talked about several balancing acts. Walmart's balancing act is how do I grow comp sales while I control my labor? And then for a supplier, it's a question of how do I spend my dollars? And in a share game that I think the next 10 years are going to be, the question is return on investment. And in those promotional dollars, where is it best spent? And I think the other trade-off that Ken did a great job of describing is on-shelf availability and localized increased assortment are a lot of times at odds with one another. We've heard of several modulars that are going out really to maximize the holding power on shelf, not to maximize assortment. And so I think both of those are key strategies for them, reducing OSA as well as increasing localized assortment. And many times they're competing, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to another topic. Amazon recently announced that they're going to be doing Amazon Fresh, which is local deliveries, grocery deliveries to markets. They're going to start or continue their test in Seattle. They're going to expand that to Los Angeles and then on to San Francisco and really kind of go to the West Coast. Article in Retailing Today says Walmart doesn't need to be concerned about that. Ross, what do you think?
Well, I think you heard from Mr. Ash, that heads up the e-commerce part of the business for Walmart, say we'll see if the consumer wants it or not. And if you know the Walmart cheer, the customer is number one. And so I think that Walmart is going to be studying this. I think suppliers should pay attention to it, but I don't see it being a big recent or near-term trend that I think will impact things immediately. One of the keys and the magic to Walmart is the mix of merchandise. That grocery and consumables drive the traffic, and general merchandise drives the margin. And so anytime you start to pull apart that model, that's the one thing that I would watch over time, is how that merchandise margin mix changes for the retailer.
Okay. Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
So if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to Google Amazon Fresh is coming. We published a piece a few months ago that I think will do a better job than I can now summarizing our thoughts. But in the near term, it's not an immediate threat to Walmart, but over the long term, it is. So if you think about the facts that we know, where Amazon is expanding to first is California, where Walmart is relatively underrepresented compared to other parts of the country. And we also know, we estimate that Amazon Fresh, even in the Seattle area, holds a low single-digit share of the grocery market. So as it has been executed, grocery delivery in the U.S. is nowhere near as successful as it is, say, in the UK, where it holds maybe a 6% share of the total grocery market. That said, I would challenge anybody who says demand doesn't exist for this to study Amazon's history, because I think what Amazon has done very successfully is stimulated demand with a very strategic and often difficult to replicate offer to the consumer. And I think not only is the consumer first for Walmart, it is first for Amazon. If you go back to the original 1997 shareholders letter that Jeff Bezos wrote, he says there is a discipline at Amazon of working backwards from the customer. And I think the real risk is that Amazon has developed a grocery delivery model that is priced right, saves time, saves money, but the point that was made about the synergistic relationship of fast-moving, low-margin consumables with high-margin discretionary general merchandise is the reason this is a long-term threat. Because in the fulfillment centers that Amazon has with temperature controls, they also have 200,000 general merchandise SKUs. And so in my view, this is not about a pure play for online grocery or even broad grocery market share. It is a way for Amazon to justify putting its own delivery fleet of trucks at the last mile in high-density urban areas and potentially change the economics of same-day delivery. And viewed through that lens over the next decade, it could give them a very compelling way to gain share of wallet, especially with the millennials who are digitally native. They grew up with technology. They're very comfortable with shopping on Amazon. And I think it's important to remember that while many online grocery models in the U.S. have either failed spectacularly or have grown incredibly slowly, one of the biggest hurdles to any of these models is customer acquisition. In other words, it's very difficult to break the habit most households have of driving to the store, pushing a cart through the store, and driving home. And yet, with the reach that Amazon has, they can target their most loyal households, zip code by zip code, street by street, with direct offers that could be as effective or more effective than any acquisition strategy we've ever seen. And we expect them to support Amazon Fresh with some of their other incredibly successful retention and loyalty models like Amazon Prime, potentially subscription or auto replenishment models. So I think Walmart is very fundamentally aware of what Amazon has done and how they compete. And what I love about the way Walmart has begun to think about this is they are competing not on Amazon's terms, but on their terms. And so I think while Walmart has no imminent plans to rapidly scale its grocery delivery pilots, I do think Walmart fundamentally understands the grocery delivery and grocery pickup models. Their pilots in the U.S. are led by a well-respected executive who spent time at Asda. And I think that if their hand is forced, as it could potentially be by this and other competitors, I think that Walmart understands they have incredible assets in their existing brick-and-mortar store network. And we don't have time to go into all the nuance of store-picked versus fulfillment center-picked models. If there's any North American competitor that I think is well-positioned to compete with Amazon in this space, I do think it's Walmart.
Okay. Ken, thoughts?
My thought about this is I see Walmart is very serious about e-commerce. Look at the meeting this morning. They have the e-commerce area. Mr. Ash speaks to the group, and they have their people there. I was in a top-to-top in Walmart Argentina just this last week, and when the Walmart people come out to meet with the supplier's top people, they have one of their top people is over e-commerce. They want to talk about e-commerce. They're serious about it, and I got to think on this Amazon Fresh thing. They'll watch it. If they deem it something they need to react to, they'll react.
Okay. And the final thing we're going to talk about this morning is the Buy Local and Made in America program. Walmart had it in place several years ago. They kind of got away from that. As it went through the SKU reduction several years ago, obviously the Buy Local kind of went out the window. And I know stores were basically shut down from buying local. Only some DSD items like soft drinks were able to be brought in, but for the most part, nothing nothing was brought in. Now they're going back and reversing that. We talked earlier about inventory and how that factors into it. But what are your thoughts, and what are the opportunities for suppliers with the buy local and made in America? And Ken, we'll start with you.
I think the Made in America thing, first of all, I applaud that. Like, I think, the point that you made is that they're doing things to try to help the economy here. I think that's good. I applaud them also for doing that kind of thing. For the suppliers, I think it can have opportunities, versus the imported products. But on consumables, I don't really notice, or I'm not aware of a lot of consumable products that are brought in from outside the United States. I mean, I know apparel and like that, but consumable products, I'm not so sure about that. But yeah, like with any Walmart initiatives, they'll take it seriously. If the supplier will understand what they're trying to accomplish and put their effort and ideas together with the Walmart's people's effort and ideas, then it can be a good opportunity for both Walmart and for the supplier.
Okay, Ross?
Yeah, I think it depends on the category, on which one of these initiatives or both, how it will impact the category. But what we're seeing when it comes to, certainly with localized assortment, is the syndicated data has really opened up the world for Walmart to see what they're missing, and for suppliers to have a reason to believe as they go in to talk to merchants. And so I think that's a big part of localized assortment. I also think their push into grocery and fresh is another aspect of this strategy. So I've seen out in stores signage even that's indicating that this product is made in this state. And so I think that just societal trend towards localization that the consumer wants. Walmart's responding to that, and I think there's opportunities for suppliers to get involved. Again, as we've talked about, I think the challenge is going to be for the categories that do have high OSA issues. How much localized assortment can you add to the category? And then the second thing is the technology behind the number of modulars that are built. Certain categories don't have the resources to build, 4,000 modulars, one for each store. And so I think, again, depending on the category, the number of modulars that can be drawn and how technology will adapt to that will determine how deep that strategy goes for certain areas of the store.
Okay. Keith, obviously buy local is good for regional suppliers or local suppliers, but what about national suppliers? What impact do you foresee on national suppliers that are shipping products through a DC?
Well, I think there's a couple things. There are two or three elements to what Walmart is doing, some of which, as was noted, are related to produce and fresh. I think from a messaging point of view, overall, as was said well earlier, this is a good message for Walmart, and I think they uniquely in this market have a right to move the needle in this area. So I think that's a very positive thing. And I also think in a lot of ways the timing makes a lot of sense. In other words, the sort of Buy American idea is well timed because labor costs internationally, freight costs, there are a lot of reasons that production that over the preceding sort of 15 years had moved out of the U.S. is now returning to or near the U.S. And so, as was very well said, this is a double bottom line initiative in many ways. It's a good message, but it's also great for business. I think the technology piece is important. Store-level planogramming is something that, depending on the category, is a reality and has been for a few years, and I think is going to continue to be a really key part of the equation. I think even if you're not doing store-level planogramming, the opportunity is to find other ways to localize. And so you may not be able to change your distribution, but you might be able to do some kind of versioning or localized promotion that helps you reflect the community that the store is in. And I think on some level that's going to be an imperative in all North American retailing. There are so many more shoppers that are value-driven, but also values-driven, and I think Walmart is really balancing those two elements in the sense that they are expanding beyond a positioning focused entirely on EDLC and EDLP, and they're enriching the positioning with some important values.
I think it's interesting to me as I listen to this that so while they're emphasizing Made in America here, they also have a program to bring U.S. products to their countries outside the United States called GBI, and that is also a high priority. And actually, U.S. products, and I have this conversation with Walmart in a number of countries where they say, people look at U.S. products, they're high quality products. You have a good reputation for quality. There's a segment of our population looking for products like that. So they're also pushing the U.S. Products outside the United States.
Which I think a lot of times no one here really hears about. I think until you travel overseas, it's something you miss out on.
Yeah, and they have stores where they have whole sections of imported products, and not just from the U.S., but there's definitely a high priority on a program they call GBI, where they're trying to bring products not just from the U.S., but first priority, I suppose, would be the U.S. to their stores in other countries.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we're going to wrap it up there. I want to thank you for taking time for joining us today, and we're very excited about getting Saturday morning meeting launched. And gentlemen, again, thank you very much, all of you, for coming in today and sharing your points of view and some great discussion. And if you would like to be a part of this show, please let us know if you have questions about it or are interested in being on a panel. We'd love to hear from you. You can contact us through the 8th and Walton website and let us know what you think about today's broadcast. Thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next Saturday morning.